Better late than never, Jill.
I know, technical difficulties as usual. How are you doing?
I want to have my spooky ambiance for this illustrious dark full moon evening. And I want to thank, first off, you in particular, Brett in particular, and the pumpkin spice goddess Cassandra at Atmos View Reusable Candles.
Ah,
I just blew it out accidentally. I can't have that. But no, this is a wonderful gift. Um, I've gotten all sorts of awesome gifts in the last 24 hours here, and I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
yeah, of course, of course. It is spooky season, and we had to make sure that you were taken care of. Yeah, we are burning through pumpkin spice like you would not believe here.
You have an awesome commercial.
Oh,
I saw that. That is wonderful.
did you see? Okay, so we filmed a series. So Cassandra, for those of you who don't know, she's the associate producer on these documentaries, and she also launched this candle company called Atmosphere. And she was filming me do a bunch of promotional videos for her. And did you see my ode to Seven commercial where I'm like, "What's in the box? What's in the
Oh,
box?" And I'm like, "My Atmosphere candle."
oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
That's a deep blow. No, it's a really good. Just to brag a little bit here, it's not your average candle. It's actually a candle that you don't have to waste, because one of the things that happens, right, is you throw away a candle its entirety. This one here has an inner shell. It's waxy right now. I can't pull it out, but you just pluck out the innards and you put in a new one. So it's pretty cool, and they're really well made.
Yes.
So thank you
Cool.
again
Yeah, of
very
course.
much.
Of course. So I gotta tell you, this is a little side thing. So
I got to do my David Letterman here.
okay, yeah, I know. I'm like, uh, so on Tuesday, uh, Mike and Brett, they were supposed to. Well, Mike was supposed to be on a shoot for Nike, and I guess Brett was going to be doing the edit on it. It got canceled or like rescheduled last minute. So all of a sudden, we're like, well, let's go down to Southern Oregon to do more filming
Okay.
for A Flash of Beauty 3. And I think it's imperative, especially when you're having to move fast and you're just like kind of having to pivot really quick and you don't know what to expect. It's good to have a sense of humor. And Brett and Mike are really good about whenever we stop at a truck stop or a little weird little kind of mini mart off the beaten path.
Yes, they are. I can attest to this.
Yeah. So if there's like any sort of like Sasquatch merchandise
Yeah.
that is over the top and really unnecessary, they both purchase something.
Right.
Uh, it's almost they've had these like twinning moments where they'll buy matching shirts. But we were at a truck stop on Tuesday, and now I'll be honest. I bought a trucker hat at this my crow hat that I wear with the state of Oregon on it. It's Oregon with that crow. I got it at this truck stop. Well, like Brett was looking for something to drink, and I was looking at the hats because I was like, "What am I taking home?" And Mike was like, "I don't know. This Modelo hat is really calling to me." He's like, "I'm gonna buy it." And it
And
just
Mike is king of the hats.
he is. He has a hat
Yeah.
fit, and so he was wearing it out. And so we're outside waiting for Brett, and I was like, "Did you see? Did you see Mike's hat?" And all of a sudden, Brett whips out. He's like, "Yeah." And I wasn't going to be left out. So he comes out, he whips on this Miller Lite hat to
That's
go with Mike's Modelo hat. And I'm just like,
that's dope.
this is ridiculous. It's like I don't know where you're gonna wear that, but just another token of a flash of beauty.
That would fit in well to most bars out here in the OP, but in particular, um, what was the bar that we went to in Vernal? I think it was called Little Bees, if I'm not mistaken, and in Phenomicon. That would be a hat that you could definitely If you're not gonna wear your tinfoil hat, the little bees, wear your
That
Modelo
would
hat,
work.
Mike.
Yeah. Okay. I'll set it aside for next year.
And we do have to mention your tiny figure here. Can you?
Just a happy.
That's so good. Jill, the ultimate tree peeker.
I'm a little Sasquatch.
I love it.
So
Bobblehead.
that kind of works. Hey. Um, so we have some stuff to get into. We had a new interview that dropped yesterday, but there are just a few little things we do want to touch on. So for those of you who, if you've been following along on Facebook, our Baker City Bigfoot weekend, it has been postponed. And that is fine with me because we have been stretched so thin and haven't had time to give it 100% of our attention. And we want everyone to have an over the top fantastic time. The new dates are March 14th through the 16th. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We are still, so we're putting that together, reformulating, and follow along for details. We'll have
Okay.
more information too soon. And then the following weekend, we're going to be in Yakima at the Yakima Bigfoot Conference. That will be a fun one. And not only will be screening both documentaries, they're actually giving us our own like meeting room with two big monitors where we can screen both the documentaries, not at the same time, but one in the morning or one in late morning, one in late afternoon. In between all that, we will be set up and doing interviews. So if you have a experience you want to share, we will be there and ready to record.
I want to put I guess we have to have you and Brett and Mike push the moneymaker envelope. Listen, here's the deal. I get some pushback when I mention the guy's name. He doesn't do conferences. This is not a conference guy, right? Like he's a lawyer. He pushes shows on cable channels, and then he does his BFRO stuff. He's kind of just, he's a little bit beyond doing conferences. This is the first one I've ever really seen that he has spoken at.
Hmm.
Now he's doing it with First Nations people at the behest of Mel, I would imagine, and Bob's going to be there, and you, and Jeff Meldrum. But listen, he said some crazy stuff lately, and he needs to put up. And I just fully expect you to push this Matt Moneymaker claim that there's obviously a new sheriff in town as it relates to reporting the crazy stuff with what was an APER community, and now we have a report that we went to last week that came off the BFRO that talked about orbs or lights in conjunction to Bigfoot activity. That before never happened. So get that camera up to him. I would love to see something like that happen.
Atonement.
So just some admission or like, what's happened here, especially mentioning where all these reports exist in the flats and why that took so long to get to this point and what's it going to look like in the future as far as the BFRO. Are these the people that run these expeditions getting rebriefed as far as what they do when they go on these expeditions when someone says, hey, I encountered some strangeness and this is as important as the data set of footprints and hair. So yeah, I think
As
it
it
would be
should
cool to do.
as it should be. I mean, if you're throwing out, and I'm not going to get started.
Yeah,
So
I'm just putting it out there.
no, okay, I'm on it.
All right,
I
Brett,
can
get
be.
on it.
I'll have my little clipboard, and I'll just do that awkward stare I do until people acknowledge me.
Is that what that is?
That's how we
That
get
you were
interviews. I just
hypoglycemic
stare
when you
until
did
people
that.
get really
Quick, get her a brownie.
talk to me. And also, I feel like, of course, we should talk about the recent news and the post that we made regarding one of our peers, a researcher, an experiencer, and just a friend. Do you want to?
Talk about Sonia.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So Sonia has some health issues. She's been dealing with cancer for quite a while privately, and it's come back aggressively, and she's dealing with it. She's caught up in how to deal with it. Right now, it's kind of like a spiritual thing over a physical thing. And so I put something on Facebook where I felt maybe like I was a little too unhopeful about the prognosis, but Sonia's very blunt about living and dying. She's kind of like a spirit, ethereal person anyway. So she's way more comfortable speaking this way than the living. Um, you know, the people that are left behind are usually the ones that are most affected anyway by death. But I believe in miracles. And I think what an astounding thing right now if we prayed over this cancer to completely dissolve in her body and she had a miraculous healing. Those kind of things do happen. And so that's why I put out, a power to prayer on the behest of healing Sonia. And, we're going to go see her soon. She's going to be a part of our lives here continually as long as God keeps her around. And she's teaching me and you and everybody else how to do this with class, if that's the right word. I don't know. Humbleness, no ego, seemingly no fear. It's really astounding.
yeah,
And if you don't know her, uh, boy, I feel really bad for you because she's probably one of the most fascinating, brave, sweetest people you'll ever meet. And she's so important to this community. And it would be a real tragedy for mankind to lose someone like this. So I'm just thinking positive because that's the way she is. She does not think negative.
yeah. And we, and I just want to put this out to anyone listening or watching in the next day or two. Uh, Brett, Mike, and I were actually driving up to visit with her on Sunday. If any of you have messages you want us to pass along or anything like that, you can email us
Yeah.
at info@bigfootdoc.com and we'll make sure she gets those. So
Yeah.
just put that out there.
And you can check some of her old videos, of course, on a Flash of Beauty. She did do some work with Meldrum, tangentially with some other well-known Canadian Bigfoot researchers, including Randy Brisson and Ken Walker of I think he's a number two or he was the number one world taxidermist two or three times running. So she's definitely in this community, but maybe you've never heard of her. Listen, there's a lot of people in this community that you've never heard of. If you're into this for 20 years, you and Brett right now are sleuthing all new names, but Sonia was one of those names that I just found out through Carrie Campbell, Ron's wife.
Hmm.
Otherwise, I would have never known that she was even living out here in the peninsula. She's just not on social media. She's off doing her own thing. But she like moved here to the Olympic Peninsula to look for Bigfoot. She scheduled her life around having an experience and seeing one. And she's experienced the phenomena as far as how it interacts with people without a visual, but she hasn't had a full on class A sighting yet. So my goal is to get her in the next month or two in the proximity of recent reports around here, however that works, and having her have an experience somehow, some way. So we're going to try to do that, whatever we can for her. But yeah, if you have any words at all that you want to say to her, just let us know. And she actually does have an email as well, and maybe I can find that real quick and put it in the chat for Brett. But go ahead, Jill.
Um, no, that was just I just wanted to touch on that.
Okay.
and I got to talk to her. I had a pretty lengthy call with her last night. It was a birthday, um, so I was glad I was able to partake in the birthday festivities.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get her email here. So she has so many people that are reaching out to me beyond her own known sphere that are trying to plan stuff uh, to lift her up. And so those things are happening as we speak. But if you want to see her, of course, Flash of Beauty, you can go check out some of the videos from the film and some of the B-roll stuff. But there's more in the future, and I shot some stuff with her in the peninsula as well. If you want to go check that out, just type in Strange Brow Radio, and there's some one-on-one stuff with her and I uh, at Manresa Castle, and those did really people really respond to her.
Were those the videos you shot with Rich? Was Rich there too? Was he a part of
So
that?
I bought Rich and her a couple of pints of Guinness and just set them free, and they work really good together. Like, it's hard to get either one of them generally to come up for air because they're both like living encyclopedias. But when I got those two together, they were handing the mic back and forth and bouncing some, really interesting notions about how this may all work. And they both think really well of one another as well. And they're neighbors, really. They live less than 5 miles away from each other. So we're all kind of out here in the peninsula. Come on out.
Yeehaw! Well, and we will. So yeah, keep Sonia in your prayers and good thoughts. Um, so we have a pretty big interview that we dropped yesterday.
I am wearing, because tonight is such a spacey, out of the world experience, I've gone full. I don't know what this is. This is more like it's not what it's not full Klingon or space gear, but it is my space coat, and it actually has Travis Walton's autograph in Sharpie right here. So, in honor of the sci-fi nature of what we're going to get into, all true. Sci-fi doesn't have to be fiction. Just look at Optimus Prime coming coming out of Austin, Texas. It's the real deal right now, folks. So yeah, let's get into it. Cody and Harold.
Oh boy. So we found out about Harold and Cody. It was July of what had this play out 2022, and we were actually so Stan Avery, the plumber from the first film, he arranged for us to do a screening in Bandon for the community, and someone in attendance was telling Brett, like, you gotta talk. This guy we know, he recently had a sighting, and you gotta talk to him. Or he had a sighting earlier because that was July, so in November. Um, they're like, it's just unbelievable. I can't even believe it, but you gotta talk to him. And there was some kind of back and forth, I think, with getting a hold of him. And if I recall, and Brett's a better person to ask because he was kind of the conduit for making this interview happen. There was some back and forth with Harold. He wasn't sure if he really wanted to go public with this. And I think his kids kind of felt the same way, but his family watched A Flash of Beauty and said, is like, if you're going to do an interview, these are the people to talk to. And so we had a phone call with him, and yeah, he's like, I'm doing one interview. I'm going to talk about it, I'm going to put it out there, and that's it. So when we finally got down there, and it's a weird, so the area is, it's an interesting area, I'll say that much. It's like was it Coquille, I believe. So it's like kind of like due west, actually, of like where the Al Moon area is,
Mm-hmm.
and even further due west of a cattle mutilation that we investigated at the beginning of all this documentary filmmaking. And we sat down, and they took us through. I mean, we drove the road to his house where they had the sighting, and we went out there, and we got like the play by play, like every detail, every, the speed, the time of day, where the sun was shining here, but in too many details to get into, but I will. And it just all made sense. It's like, oh my gosh, okay, so I can totally see what unfolded in front of them as they turned that corner, and there was something in the road, something kind of on the bend of the road there, and how it would have been fully lit by the sun, because there was a lot of like trees like overhanging that would have cast a shadow over the road, and so this was like an open area. But where do we begin? How do we even dive into what they saw? I mean, it kind of bends the mind.
Well, Harold gives mention, and so does Cody, of an area out in Coquille where they'd heard about recent reports. Now, I don't love the fact that they said the specific area, but oh well, they said it. So they talk about a place called Moon Creek, which is fitting, right? Just given my background. So Moon Creek is where the stuff goes down, and that's what they've heard as a community out in Coquille. Now Coquille, I've worked out in Coquille. I used to build fences for Weyerhaeuser out there. It's very rugged. I think the Rogue River side saddles through Coquille. It's very timber rich, let's say. And the mountains, the coastal mountains, they are very unforgiving. Like they go up and they go down. They're ridge valleys and ridges and tops and peaks, and
Mhm.
that's pretty much it. And some really rugged river country as well. I don't know Moon Creek, but that's a good beginning here because it leaves them in an area where they're open to the idea of like, hey, we've heard stories about Moon Creek and these creatures, and so that is kind of I think that's an important part of the story just based upon the fact that they're not second guessing the fact that they could also have a story too. And then you have Cody, who is from an area in Utah where he's giving mention first off in the interview that hey, I've also had strange experiences out in Utah. There's TV crews out here filming stuff not related to Bigfoot, probably UFOs, I'm guessing, maybe
Mhm.
Bigfoot stuff as well. And he's had some stuff happen. Now he never gets into it, but he mentions a family member's experience where they have an apparition appear to them, and it brings them peace and harmony. And so they both are coming from a perspective where they're engaging the mystery schools at some base level, but are open to it. And that's when things really change for them because it's not just one mystery, it's like three mysteries within a few seconds that open up.
And then some. I mean, so let's just do a recap. So it's morning. They're driving to work. They're going around. The road is it has like some subtle curves in it. And as they're turning a corner, Harold just happens to look up, and he's like, "There's something in the road." And does this not sound familiar? And I don't know if this is what he honestly saw, or or the fact that that's what the mind process, your mind's trying to, like, what am I looking at, but he described what he thought was like an elk on its back legs with its arms out, like if you ever see elk, trying to eat the leaves and stuff.
Oh yeah.
And then and Cody's like, yeah, and I just happened to look up, and in that time, all of a sudden, it wasn't an elk,
Mhm.
and this whole like transformation began.
Mhm.
And you know, around the same time, you're going to know who I'm talking about. And maybe I sent you the post on Facebook. And I'm just kind of sidestepping here because if I don't say it, I'll regret it. And otherwise, I'll forget it. One of our mutual friends, Jones, Don McAnally. Don, do you know who I'm talking about?
I know this person.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're friends with her. She's in the Ozarks. She's always having Don McNally.
Oh, this sounds right. Yeah. Okay. I know
Um,
what you're getting at.
yeah, she's out there. She has a very active area. But one day she posted photos. She's like, yeah, we thought something was going on over there, and I took a photo, and like with our eyes, there was nothing there, but in the photo, there's like this orange streak,
Mm.
and I'm like, oh,
Mm.
that sounds familiar.
Mm.
Um, I need to follow up with her on that. I need to send her this interview to just kind of try to
Yeah.
connect some dots. But I'll tell you what, when they took us there and they're like, they were adamant. They're like, they were down there looking for hairs, looking for any kind of disturbance or anything. I mean, they were, in spite of what they saw, like something physical go down, levitate, change forms, I mean, shapes,
Mhm.
and become, what do you say, brighter than the sun, and then go shooting off. I applaud them for being like citizen scientists and going down and looking for hard evidence like hair or any other kind of footprints or anything like that, especially in spite of the other stuff. I mean, it's one thing to have a sighting and to see it walk off or run off into the woods
Mhm.
and look for like fur on branches or disturbance in the rocks, but I mean, how do you wrap your head around it turning into levitating, changing shapes,
Mm.
shooting off? It's like,
Can we dissect this bit by bit?
yep, let's do it.
Okay. I want to dissect it because there's a lot here as far as witness description. And Brett also made mention too that we should talk about, and I don't know the story.
Yeah.
That are you want to mention that? I just saw you said
Yeah, I
something.
have it's in my notes here.
Okay.
So they've also Harold mentioned to us that after this event happened, one day his neighbor was like, "Oh, by the way, there was like a giant UFO like hovering over your house." Basic uh basic stuff in Coquille, I guess. But that happened. And also he talks about a lot of unmarked black helicopters in the area.
Call Art Bell. Here we go. I mean, it's a thing, right? Like UFOs and the MIBs.
Not only that, Tobe, but shortly after, in the same time frame, Harold shared with us that there was a forestry worker who it sounds kind of like the same thing that Mel would do, like he's out counting trees or out in the woods doing whatever, tree count or marking trees. And this forestry worker is walking and comes up on the backside of what appeared to be a Bigfoot, like 8 or 9 feet tall. It turns around. It has a wolf face, a wolf like face, and then it disappears. Just like that. Like it didn't run off and disappear. It disappeared, it like dissipated. It poof, abracadabra, I'm gone. It disappeared. So she went into like a gas station or mini mart, and she was pretty shook up about it, trying to tell people what she saw, and that's how it got back to Harold. But
Oh, I gotcha.
I
Okay.
mean, you
A
think
very
about these
small
whole
town like
areas.
that. If you're a forestry worker in Coquille, people are going to know you're family, your first name, where they're going to know everything.
Yeah.
But I mean, the ball's on Harold to talk about this openly. He didn't have to talk to Brett. He didn't ever have to. I mean, it couldn't be good for business to be the lightning bolt Sasquatch guy. I mean, unless he's an electrician and he wants a new logo or something, like
Yeah.
this is not good for business. So incredible courage, and Cody as well, right? Because he's a new employee. He's trying to raise a family. They both have to tell their wives what happened to them. But I want to like dissect this bit by bit because there's so much here. Like what I remember, I have in my notes here is that when Harold sees the deer, the elk, on the hind legs, he sees it from the profile view at the edge of the road. Tell me if I'm wrong. And he sees it standing on two legs.
Mm-hmm.
And he turns his head briefly within a second to say, Cody, pick your head up. There's something in the road. And within that second, he says they get a little bit closer, but yet he doesn't say, I could see then it was a monkey. He says it went from an elk on two legs to this orange haired monkey or ape.
Mm-hmm.
Is that so? To me, there's a distinction here. And Cody didn't argue this point with him. Of course, Cody didn't see the elk. But given what you just said about the skinwalker sounding Bigfoot, and what Rhonda Moorhead has said about her and her cousin seeing something shapeshift out in the Sierras, uh, given what Jack has talked about, and countless other whistleblowers, that this is something that is able to, change its shape at will. It has a variable state, like Simeon Hine would say. So I thought that was important.
Well, also, Eric Bard from the Secrets of Skinwalker Ranch,
Bingo.
he was perplexed. He said, well, maybe Bigfoot is just an avatar
Hmm.
that is one of the avatars being used
Hmm.
to be here.
But like their
Uh,
most, but see, this is what the weird part about it is why Bigfoot? Because they could just appear as a deer or as a squirrel or as a chimp, or you know what I mean. But they come up as this half subspecies. So I tend to think that Bigfoots are Bigfoots. Like they can do these other things as well, but they live as Sasquatches or these energetics, these balls of light. And we'll get to the balls of light here. So Cody, Harold, they have this brief sighting that goes from elk to something that is now shrinking down on itself. And this is where it gets really interesting, is not only as it's changing its shape from an ungulate to a primate, it's changing its color as it's doing it. And they describe this really intense orange color, correct? Like bright reddish orange color that is
they compare
happening.
it to the sun. Harold compared
Yes.
it to the sun, like that kind of intensity.
Yes. Yes. And then he says as it shrinks down, it becomes an orangutan with this extreme bright orange coloration of its hair. And it's starting to go from orangutan now and levitating up. So
It's
Cody,
levitating, folks.
yeah, Cody starts describing it as the body is coming up. They're both basically filling in the sentence for one another that this thing is levitating. And they're like, it's levitating. And so they see this orangutan start to levitate and it brings its body down into a fetal position. This is what they describe, fetal position of some kind. Now, out here on Third Beach, second beach where Rich Germeau had his sighting, there is a macaw, and I could find this guy. There is a macaw elder that went on record on Expedition Bigfoot. He described the exact same thing, that when the Sasquatch began to cloak, it brought its body down like this, and it went down on one knee or two knees on the beach, and then it cloaked. So that's the second time I've heard that from somebody. Not to even get into the details, which we have to tear into the fact that it's underneath a frickin' power pole. Didn't have to be, but there's a lot of things there. So, just given our new connections with Larry and Inella out on the Macaw Reservation, this is somebody that I think would be important to talk to, especially for Harold to talk to this guy. Because here's the deal is Harold throughout this whole thing is just like, what are the chances we'd have saw this? 1,000,000,000 to 1? Well, then he says, what if other people have seen it? Like, you guys could go find out if there's one other experiencer out there that has seen this before. I bet there's a bunch of people that have never reported this phenomena of them going down kind of prone position, not prone, but into the fetal position and changing their energetic shapes.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about. It's almost like conserving. Are you trying to concentrate energy or condense?
Mm-hmm.
Now that you know who we should have on here is Simeon High, because he would be able to jump in with
We
some
need, instead of a
ideas.
bat phone, we need a sim phone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Simeon, dark matter monster.
There is some footage. I remember showing Dr. Mayer this footage when I was filming with her because we were talking about Harold and Cody. I was just like, this is how weird it is. Like, if you haven't seen the doc, this is what these men are describing, and it's just about 3 hours up the road. And we found some footage of what looked like a Buddhist monk in a cave doing the exact same thing. I think they call it the rainbow body. That's like the ultimate level for them to get to is where they can turn into light. And there's some really remarkable footage of a group of monks inside of a cave somewhere, and one of the monks doing exactly what Harold is describing. Um, so, you know, I remember when Lee Trippett, who is an astrophysicist out at the University of Oregon. He's actually one of the first Bigfooters that kind of pulled me inside and said, "Hey, you don't have to leave your brains at the door to think that Bigfoot can do all these things here." He goes, "It's also kind of like biblical, right? Like Christ said, 'What I can do, you can do too, Peter, and walk on water.'" So he was arguing it from an apologetics point of view as well. But he was making mention of that fact that they could do things that we had forgotten to do. And so these are one of the things that I look into is just like, is this an old ability that we had ourselves here that they're just at have a heightened awareness of. But throughout this whole thing, sorry I'm so passionate about this, Cody and Harold are not lying. They're not making any of this shit up.
They're
And
straight shooters.
totally straight shooters, and they're filling in each other's sentences back and forth, very familiar to me and Daryl, right? And it's an amazing. The response online is incredible. If you don't have time to watch the whole interview, just go look at the comments because these aren't the only guys that are having this experience.
Yeah.
Like other hunters are on there, like, "Oh my god, thank God you guys saw this crazy stuff too." It's incredible.
Yeah. Hey, Tobe, I actually I have the YouTube page pulled up. I'm not going to read all the comments specifically on their interview, but I did make a post in the community section that we were going to discuss this. And just to kind of recap, there's some comments here. Someone mentioned, to me, this shows how the Sasquatch people are able to do what is said so much on this channel. Oh, in Sasquatch, Ontario. So Mike Patterson talks a lot about similar activity. It shows how they use energy and frequency and vibrations to manipulate themselves and their surroundings. Orbs and this square energy cube are their means of travel between our world and other dimensions. This is how they can move around so easily and seemingly disappear without a trace. Okay, that tracks.
Mm-hmm.
They can distort your perception. Um, The answer as to why this entity appeared to these two men is actually in the video itself. However, it takes spiritual discernment to see it.
Well, that's yeah. I mean, these are all. See, this is the kind of meat and potatoes that most conferences should be filled with, right? Like you should have a presenter go up and everybody have a chance to respond to it in real time. And this is what's happening in the chat is people are so engaged with these what I would call expert witnesses who saw in broad daylight at 10:15 a.m. on a clear, beautiful day, if I remember correctly, the first week of November in 2021.
November
So
2nd.
2021, there was hardly anybody on those roads back then. So maybe that's why. Like, we noticed that a lot of activity died down from 2020 to 2023 on our property out here, but maybe stuff was happening out underneath the power lines. I don't know. There's so many details here. He goes on to talk about how they his legs. Like I just remember noting here the way that Harold is describing how massive its legs are. Like that's a very like if you're gonna make up a story just like this thing was huge and it was 9 to 10 feet tall and it was just towered above us and it was just but he was describing aspects of the body that came off as just like shocking. And I
Yeah.
thought that was a really telling fact that he saw something outside of the height, which it was 9 to 10 feet tall, according to their height measurements. And they had a chance to do a measurement, right? Given the yellow tape on the power pole.
And that's the whole thing is after their sighting, they were on their way to a job site. So
Yeah.
this happened and then
Right.
they had to go to work. Imagine what a productive day that was going to be.
Right. What do
What
you
the
do
heck?
when you get to the job site and you can't talk about it? What they didn't mention what happened at the job site.
Yeah, I mean, hey, you leave your personal stuff at the door when you get to work, it's
You
being
do.
professional. Um, so yeah, but could you imagine the stress of like having to focus at
Mm.
work and then so
Right.
then they
Or
keep
somebody
that.
else's. I imagine they're like at somebody else's business or house because they're out doing a house call or business call. So it's not like they're going to an office job,
Right.
but so they have to kind of like introduce themselves and sell them as the guys to bid on the contract or whatever they were doing. It was a big job according to
Yeah.
Harold.
Yeah.
And he had here's what's interesting too is there was something out of the ordinary that happened before they went to work. Is that Harold always drove.
Yeah.
Cody never drove, but Harold had hurt himself to the point where he's just like, here are the keys, dude. You drive me. I thought that was interesting because here he'd done this route time and time again, and now
Well,
there's a new perspective behind the wheel, motivating the source of energy down the road on this old track that Harold has gone through, and now he's just the passenger. Harold's never been the passenger. He's
yeah.
always been the eyes on the road.
Yeah, and I just want to add is when we were there on location, like when they pointed out to like where the power lines are. Now, keep in mind these aren't like the power lines that were running by Daryl's place,
Hmm.
like the big ones.
Bonneville power
Yeah,
lines,
it
yeah.
wasn't like that at all. These were just like your telephone, like your standard, power lines that go along the road. Nothing. These are basic. Um, but when he pointed out, because it had like that cable with the yellow marker, like the insulator type
Oh yeah, like the
plastic.
plastic tube they put around the pole.
Yeah. When
Okay.
they pointed out like from where we were standing, it was this high and they pointed to where like the head was. That was hard for me to like wrap my head around because you hear when people say like, oh yeah, it had to have been 8 or 9 feet tall because it
Mm,
was it stood next to this sign, and
mm.
that's just hearing people talk about it, kind of secondhand, but being there on location, like
Right.
right there. And when Harold's standing, he's like, this is where we parked the car, this is where the car came to a stop and we actually saw it, and that is where it was standing, and its head hit right here, and
Hmm.
he like indicated that. It affects you, it made me feel. You just had to wonder. It's like you looked around. You wondered, like, is it back? Is it still here? Must
Right.
be here.
Right.
Um, and
Is it?
even the area where he talks about how it shoots across the bushes,
Yeah.
that's another just like standing there and trying to, trying to do the math, I guess, trying to figure it out. But looking to where it went, I mean, it was like all these blackberry bushes, and then it like drops down. There's like a creek or something down there. Um, it
Holler.
just a holla. It just didn't make sense. Like it was one of those things where like I was hearing the story and I'm like, okay, now what happened? They're like, yeah, it just shot off right like that, and
And they point up, right? Like it wasn't straight across. It was kind of at an upward angle.
it shot. Yeah, according to the artwork and
Yeah.
according to what they said, it shot up.
Hmm.
And like, I mean, I'd be curious to go back and take another look at that area again because I'm trying to remember. I was more fixated on like the blackberries and all this stuff like in the
Right.
immediate forefront. I didn't focus as much as what was on the other side. Like, did it disappear into that stuff? I don't remember what the trees were like on the other side, but
It's so cool watching you relive this because you're literally looking up to where this experience
it's like
happened.
it was right
And
here and they
yeah, but you're a witness now to seeing the area, and
I'm a
so you're
secondhand
caught up.
witness.
Well, to the area, so yeah. Um,
The new title of my autobiography,
I
Secondhand.
feel bad for the people in the proximity to that power pole because I can imagine them looking at their electric bill the next week like,
Like,
son of a.
right? It makes you want.
So, okay. So it goes from orangutan to a sphere. And he does it like this, I think. He's not like it goes to a sphere. He goes like this with his
Yeah,
hands. So it's within what I'm familiar with seeing, which is softball or not, I would say volleyball to softball size to kind of like beach ball size.
beach ball.
Yeah.
Beach ball. Good call.
And then he says all at once, um, here's what else they said during this transition point. There is this amorphous, soft edge quality to it. So I just picture like an amoeba or something like that, like a squiggly little energy form that is pushing itself in this variable state to this solid, what he calls a cube.
Mm-hmm.
A cube. And he holds his hand again, like right in this area. And this is where the edges, he said 3 to 3.5 feet up off the ground from orangutan to cube. And then he says something that I'd never heard before. He goes, it's brighter than the sun. It's brighter than the sun. Now, we'll talk about what else is brighter than the sun in a second here at Phenomicon. Um, but
Right.
he says when it goes from this cube, it turns into this shaft or lightning bolt looking thing.
Well, it was because it shot off so fast.
Yeah,
It
but it
left
like
like
it changed its shape in order to do it into like this spire or this tube. Is that right? In the painting, it shows like it going from a cube into like I don't know, like I just picture like a yellow lightning bolt.
it was my understanding that it was because it took off so fast, it was like a blur. I
Well,
don't
they
know
said
if
that it slingshot like Stretch Armstrong, like its body was catching up to it. So as it shot off, it was like a recoil effect. So that's what. And then he said it was tan. He said it was a tan color when it did that. He didn't say that it was brighter than the sun at that point. So I just picture like a khaki brown yellow color. That's new to me. That's an incredible hidden detail that I didn't know till now.
it was like a pair of Levi Dockers being. Just kidding.
So there I am sitting at the first Phenomicon in the hotel lobby, and I'm sitting talking to this guy and his wife that I'd never talked to before, and I'm telling this story to them. It's just like, oh man, you seen UFOs? And he begins to tell me this story that this is why I preempted Harold and Cody about Now I'm forgetting the Navy diver's name. Do you remember it?
Scott Cassell.
Scott Cassell. Okay, I got to remember that. So Scott and I met at the hotel, and I said, "Listen, I want to hear this story." He goes on to describing something very similar underwater that he saw, I believe, on the California coast. When Scott isn't a very accomplished diver, worked with the Humboldt squids, and he was a reluctant UFO witness. I said, "Listen, everything you just described to me about seeing underwater, you have to come see this premiere of this film tonight." And he looks at his girlfriend's like, "Okay, I guess we're going to not only go to the conference, but we're going to stay up later than average and go watch this Bigfoot film because apparently Bigfoots can do this too." And Scott's response when this scene happened and Harold and Cody are describing, and you have the intensity of the edits and the music, and then the portrait done by the artist, the painting. Scott just literally, I remember looking over at Scott watching this thing, and his mouth open, and he put his head, down on the table like this, and just shook his head, and it changed him. It changed him because these guys were transparent and told the truth, and Harold never met Scott Cassell before, but there's another person that he should talk to, a second witness that has seen something very similar. There's at least two other witnesses right now that are reluctant that have seen something very similar to what Harold and Cody have seen. So I don't know. Not only is it cool, it's very helpful for these people that have these hidden events that want to talk to others.
That's how we normalize it. That's how we remove the stigma.
Remove it. Now there was some snipey little comments. One of the comments was about how they had to show up with machetes and go down into the ravine to kind of protect themselves. That wasn't what I caught at all from the reason they brought machetes down.
It was so dense with blackberries.
Right.
Trust me, like if you were a landscaper
Yeah.
or if like your cat or dog went missing, you'd be doing the same thing to get down there. It was thick. So
Yeah. We do. I mean, the idea that we are having sightings on power lines of Sasquatch and UFOs, let's face it, both, at the same time, by the way, especially large UFOs and UFOs that drop off what are perceived as little orbs down into the forest, which is a ever growing phenomena happening as we speak. Just watch TikTok and a lot of these channels here that devoted on YouTube to recent UFO stuff, but power lines are absolutely a thing. And I did joke a little bit earlier about, nearby residents looking at maybe a spike or a withdrawal on their power bill based upon the phenomena. One of the things that we had heard is that when the phenomena was near the Bonneville power lines, that they're actually getting a huge withdraw of power on the lines themselves. Now, you couldn't marry the phenomena exactly to the point where the Bonneville was experiencing this, but this came from one of the sources out in our research area that there actually was some kind of withdrawal or deduction or strain on the power lines themselves in the area where the phenomena was. So one of the things to look at.
that's a really interesting I guess data point, but I wonder how could you work with how could you get power companies
You'd
to
need a
volunteer
whistleblower.
that information
You'd need a whistleblower and
and
say, listen,
correlate that? Yeah, so if you are listening, if you do work for a power company or know someone who does, who would like to do a deep dive for us and become an official Sasquatch power line whistleblower
a lineman.
of sorts.
Yeah.
It's like Roy Neary, but different.
Oh, side note here is that I believe on the 12th or the 14th of November is the UFO Congress hearings again. So pay attention to that. If you have a chance, go watch Weaponized, the last one with Corbell and Knapp. and they get into it. They don't talk about Bigfoot in that one, but they do talk about a new program that came about. Listen, all this stuff is connected. So when I talk about UFOs, I'm talking about Sasquatch. In my brain, it rings true. I don't care what anyone else thinks. So it's part and partial. Sasquatch is just another euphemism for the phenomenon. After watching this episode, what choice do you have? You
Mm-hmm.
know these guys aren't full of it. Now you're in a predicament here, folks, where you just go, you're going to. I mean, I sent this video off to some blessed little aper friends of mine. I'm like, deal with this, guys. Like,
How'd they
they're going to come
respond?
to a conference, and what are you going to call these guys BSers to their face? You know that's not true. They're just as compelling as Bob Gimlin was.
How did they respond? Or did you even get a
No,
response?
they don't. They don't. They don't respond. It's like I never sent them anything.
No, and it's interesting. Yeah, I've had the same reaction, not specifically with this video, but now that you mention it, I have like a list of people to send it to. When I've sent out the sequel, A Flash of Beauty, Paranormal Bigfoot, to people who are like, well, that's too far for you. You guys are crazy.
Right.
And I'll send it. I'm like, well, here it is. Please watch it and let's have a discussion afterwards.
Yeah, and they just.
That response never comes in.
It
So
reminds me of so much what's happened over a period of the last couple of years of my life. But yeah, so if you ask yourself why you don't want to watch it, given the fact of the details we told you here, there has to be some interest. These aren't deadbeats. They didn't even want to talk about it. Like you hear about Harold vetting Brett, and they rented your movies. He checked out your website. He had long conversations with him. It was a one and done interview. uh, Cody shows up in Utah at the moment that the footage where I just described, and sits in the back of the audience and then leaves back to Oregon, doesn't even want to meet anybody about it. Like they don't want any part of the public specter of this stuff, but they feel compelled that it's important,
yeah,
right? It's important even
you
in the
know, and it's
world right
how
now.
would people respond if it had been a situation where we rounded the corner and there was a Bigfoot standing there and then it turned and ran off into the bushes and
Hmm.
I mean, would that be easier for some people to swallow? Yes,
Hmm.
perhaps. But
I
I
mean,
don't
there's.
think that's the direction the conversation's going in. And it's almost like, you know what? It's like seek discomfort. We have to have hard conversations. And
Mhm.
the phenomena is like, you guys aren't moving fast enough. We gotta crank it up a notch. Here, take that.
Yeah, it feels so good to be, uh, not held back by my supposed peers that are, you know, back in the Stone Age, as far as I'm concerned. And I don't know, maybe they've had stuff like this happen, and a testimony like this may break through. There's a lot of stuff happening out here in the Olympic Peninsula with the apers being forced to have to face this paranormal issue. And a little bit has to do with the fact that I've showed up here. It's just because I won't shut up. Now, I'm not outing anybody, but I posted something the other day and brought a few apers into the conversation and, tagged people. And it's not to say, hey, I'm going to blame you because I think this way. It's because of the fact that these are just new thoughts. Like let's try to rethink how we understand what's going on here, and at least have a different conversation at the end of the day.
You know what, Tobe? And in the meantime, we are here at A Flash of Beauty holding space for them to have these conversations. And when they're ready, we can talk about it.
I want to mention before we go, and again, if you guys have any words for Sonia Zohar, and just look her up on YouTube. Sonia is Sonyazohar. You can find some tidbits of her out there, including A Flash of Beauty. That's at info@bigfootdoc.com. Info@bigfootdoc.com. If you have any words, we're going to be seeing her definitely on Sunday. Also, a special thank you to some helpful clients that came out to my property today. David and his wife and their new little baby, Obi. I think you're watching tonight. Thank you for watching, and thanks for watching. Hopefully, you'll watch a Flash of Beauty after this and go down the rabbit hole. And tomorrow they're coming by and picking up a batch of Sasquatches, fresh wood watchers, here from my home studio. So thank you guys for doing that. Also, October 23rd, over at the new YouTube channel, you can go to Olympic Strange Days Live. We're bringing back right now, once a month, live podcast of the paranormal at the Anchor Tavern in Port Townsend, Washington. We're going to start at 7 to close. 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time over at Olympic Strange Days on YouTube. All you have to do is just go there at 7 on the 23rd and look for the live button, and you'll see me tossing back a pint, sitting there with the audience and patrons of the Anchor Tavern. And my call to them and my call to you is come not only with your Bigfoot stories, because we're going to get into that first hour, but come with your ghost stories. Come with your strange. Come with your skepticism. I would love to have a back and forth between some respectful conversation of people that are skeptical of these issues. So we'll see where things go with that. I'm excited to introduce it. It's been a while since we've done anything live, and Port Townsend is the right place to do it. So October 23rd.
Sounds good. Let me look here at my notes. Yeah, I think we got it. Yeah, I'm excited about that, and we're heading in. We're barreling towards Halloween, so things are going to get interesting. They always do.
And stay tuned for the podcast. We're going to try to launch everything as far as our first episode. Then there'll be one time weekly. We haven't decided on a date yet when those will be put out, but this is your chance to go even deeper with some of the guests that you've already seen on video. And you can also ask some of these guests questions at info@bigfootdoc.com. And maybe we can get those questions lined up for some of the podcast queries that we have in the future.
Sounds good.
Well, my work is done.
Well, no, your work is just beginning. You have more wood watchers to carve. You guys, it is the holiday season. They make awesome gifts. Reach out to Tobe.
Oh, yes.
He ships direct.
I do. I have some commissions here because of this podcast I got to get started on tomorrow. So busy with the slivers all day tomorrow. And then I will see you tomorrow as well.
That's right.
All right, gang. Signing off. Take care of yourself.